Because and she still doesn't, she doesn't have a history of convictions against law enforcement officers. And we felt that it was important, not only myself, but National Action Network and others felt it was important to get a solicitor on this case that we could believe in. You know, it's one thing about believing in somebody that proves themselves. But when you have a history of officer-involved shootings where nobody gets convicted and you have that same solicitor on that case, it's very hard to have that trust. So we didn't have that trust originally. But I'm feeling pretty good about Scarlett Wilson and the way she handled this case.
Do you think that a part of some people of concerns, because there's been a lot of talk around the courtroom, that a great concern is the way the community respects, and of course obviously so, and should respect law enforcement, that they might be afraid and reluctant to convict a police officer because of their standing in the community, that it's difficult for people to challenge the authority of an officer?
And we have a major flaw in our community thought process. We need to understand that law enforcement, as well as our elected officials, they work for us. We are the employer, they're the employee. Anytime that there's any misrepresentation of what the people want, anytime the people have a feeling of fear and dread when it comes to the people that work for them, something is wrong with the thought process in the people. And that's why myself and my fellow organizers and activists on the ground, we're trying to change that thought process around in order to empower the people to say, not only say enough is enough, but to show our elected officials and our law enforcement that we will not stand by idly as these situations happen. They can expect something back from us.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your
Carolyn.
work, and we imagine that we will be speaking with you again in the hours and days and weeks to come. Thank you so much. And of course, we will continue to follow the very latest here. We are live in downtown Charleston as we continue to bring you the very latest information. The Michael Slager murder trial ends in mistrial. Brendan, back to you at the desk.
All right, News 2's Carolyn Murray, downtown Charleston, outside the courthouse. We certainly appreciate that, Carolyn, as we continue to get reaction about the mistrial declaration in the Michael Slager murder trial. We have received a statement regarding the mistrial of Michael Slager from Solicitor Scarlett Wilson, the prosecution. She sent out this statement. It's a little bit long, but I'm going to read it to you in full. It says, "My thoughts and prayers are with the Scott family. We are grateful for their patience, understanding, and cooperation with us. They have not received the credit they deserve in their calm leadership for the community. The Scotts have been a sterling example of dignity and grace in extraordinary circumstances. This is a very difficult time for them, but I have no doubt that they will continue to support our efforts to find justice for this case. I have no doubt that they will continue to show their faith in the criminal justice system." She goes on to say, "While I cannot overstate our disappointment that this case was not resolved, I commend those who sacrificed so much time, energy, and effort to serve on this jury. We will try Michael Slager again. We hope the federal and state courts will coordinate efforts regarding any future trial dates, but we stand ready whenever the court calls. As a lawyer and prosecutor, I am subject to special rules limiting my ability to make public comments about pending cases and defendants in criminal matters. For these reasons, my office cannot comment on the merits of this case. By law, the defendant remains presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty." End quote. That is the statement regarding the mistrial in the Michael Slager case from Solicitor Scarlett Wilson. So she says she's not going to publicly comment on this, but she did send us that statement via email, the one I just read to you. Now, for the past 6 weeks, we have been covering this via the phone. And Charlie, we certainly appreciate it. I haven't had time to talk to you before this moment, so I just want to gauge your reaction to what happened today. Not totally surprised, because we had talked about this just last week.
Yes, the possibility of a hung jury, a deadlock jury, a mistrial was there. It's come to fruition. So the first trial really is a nullity. Both sides start from scratch, so to speak. But really, from a practical standpoint, the cases on both sides have been laid out. There's been sworn testimony. Typically, in my experience, a retrial benefits the state because under our rules, the information the state has is subject to discovery by the defense. and with limited exceptions, not the reverse. So, defendant Slager put up his case in the entirety. He's under sworn testimony as to what went on. The state can look at this testimony, can sharpen its presentation. One key factor that will come, I suspect, within the next day or two, and I'm sure your fine news organization will be on top of this, is what the jurors were thinking. They don't have to talk to anyone, but I suspect many will. And what they have to say about what they were thinking, the strengths and weaknesses of the respective cases will be really important. And that will be fascinating to hear what information comes from that source.
Yeah, I'm sure, as we've heard before, that Scarlett Wilson will definitely be going to those jurors. She said it as she addressed the jury right before the end of this trial, that she wanted to, I guess, pick their brains and figure out what they were thinking during this trial. So she's going to certainly be talking to those jurors a lot, isn't she?
Yes, and I'm sure the defense will as well. Also, what's really interesting, there is this distinct possibility that the federal government may choose to prosecute defendant Slager next. They have that option. I'm sure there's going to be some discussions about coordinating the prosecutions. That may be possible, that instead of the state going next, the federal government may present their case. So we'll have to wait and see. There's lots of information to be gleaned from a mistrial, and people often misunderstand. Mistrial, it's not a verdict. A decision has not been reached, and so the case starts anew, so to speak. But again, with that important exception, we know under sworn. In this case, we've talked about this as well. This case has really gone on for a really, really long time. There's lots of information with sworn testimony and exhibits and all sorts of experts testifying. So both sides know completely what the other side is going to be saying, so to speak, or testifying to. So both sides can sharpen their presentation. But as I've said, typically, and I think this case will prove to be right in line with my experience, it benefits the state. Also, if those jurors were only considering a voluntary manslaughter conviction, I don't know if that's the case, but if that's the case, the solicitor may want to consider going forward only on voluntary manslaughter and dropping the murder allegation. We'll just have to wait and see what's decided in that regard.
Charlie, stay on the line real quick. I want to come back to you, but right now I'm told that News 2's Carolyn Murray is downtown outside the courthouse with Police Chief Greg Mullen, and we want to hear from him real quick. But Charlie, stay on the line because I have more questions for you. Carolyn, we'll go down to you real quick.
Brendan, thank you. Yes, Charleston Police Chief Greg Mullen is with me now. Of course, we are in the city of Charleston. Chief Mullen, thank you so much for being with us. And I guess one of the big concerns that people have right now that this trial has been declared mistrial is whether there is any concern about safety in downtown Charleston.
Well, we haven't heard a thing, and throughout the 5 weeks, before the trial started, we reached out to the community, we reached out to the clergy and asked them to work with us and to pray for peace and to just be a collaborative community like we have been throughout many tragedies recently. And I'm very happy to say that they have responded in a very positive way. We have not had any issues. Clearly there are people that are upset and there's a lot of emotion around this trial, and we understand that. And what we're hoping is that people who would like to express their opinions and who want to express that emotion do so. They certainly do it in a way that does not create violence or destruction with our community. I mean, we live here. This is our home. We've been trying to communicate that message for a long time now, is that we have had tragedy. We've responded to that tragedy as a community, as a whole community. And this is just a stop in the journey. This mistrial today is not the end of this situation. There's going to be another trial. And I think, as you've heard many people say today, that that's exactly what this is, a stop in this journey. And our role as police officers, as it has been throughout all of these tragedies that have happened in Charleston, is to make sure that we provide a safe place for our citizens, so if they want to express themselves, they can, and that they don't violate other people's rights or safety while they're doing that. So I have not heard of any issues at this point. We certainly will be working with all of our law enforcement partners and making sure that we do the very best we can to make sure the city remains safe. And like I said, we have responded much differently than other communities to great tragedy.
Why do you think that is, Chief? Why does this community seem to be a beacon, if you will, and certainly react differently? I mean, there are certainly protests here. We've all seen them. We've covered them, and certainly you've been a part of watching the police enforcement activity, keeping people safe. Why do you think each time our community has behaved differently?
Well, I certainly have to give great credit to the families that have been involved in these tragedies. They have shown great grace, and you can't describe the forgiveness that they have communicated. So that's a huge part of that. The other, I think, is the fact that whether we agree or disagree with one another, we're able to sit down and talk with one another instead of at each other. It's just like today. I mean, there's lots of people that have different opinions here, but what we're able to do is agree on one thing, is that we don't want our community to be destroyed. We don't want violence in our community, and I think that is the difference, that even if we disagree with one another, we can come together and we can talk about things, and nobody, no matter what side you're on, wants our home to be destroyed, and that, I think, is what makes the difference.
You're not trying to persuade or dissuade anyone from protesting as long as it's done in a respectful way.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, part of our job as law enforcement officers is to provide people the right to exercise their First Amendment rights. There's also rules and processes that we try to work with people on, because we want to make sure that the protesters or the people who are demonstrating are safe, and we also want to make sure that they're not violating the safety or the rights of others. So we try to make sure that we are the neutral parties to make sure that the community remains safe, because like I said, no matter who you are or how you feel, Charleston is our home, and we want to make sure that nobody damages or destroys or creates violence in our home.
Right. Chief Mullins, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much. I appreciate
Okay.
your time.
Thank you.
We will continue our coverage here in downtown Charleston. We are going to go over to News 2's Travis Rice. Travis has been here all afternoon speaking with people, getting their reaction to the decision, mistrial in the case of the Michael Slager murder trial. Travis?
Hey, good evening, Carolyn. Well, I talked to the Scott family and the Scott family attorneys right after the verdict came out. And, of course, the big thing here, a year and 8 months after a video surfaced of an officer shooting a fleeing man in the back, there, of course, is a mistrial for that officer. The Scott family held a miniature press conference around 4:30 a little bit ago. Judy Scott, Walter Scott's mother, had the most powerful words. Take a listen.
I trust God. I believe God. I am encouraged, because I know God is able. He will get his just reward. And we have the federal trial and another trial to go. I'm just waiting on the Lord. I'm just going to rest in the Lord. I'm going to rest in the Lord, because you see, the reason why I can speak like I am, because the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I have been born again. I've been washed in the blood of the Lamb. And there's something about Jesus when he's on the inside. I fear not. I don't care what man say. I don't care how it looks. It's not over. Y'all hear me? It's not over. So God say it's over.
One of the Scott family attorneys, Chris Stewart, tells me that Judy Scott has been the rock of not just the family but the legal counsel during these times. I talked to Chris Stewart after the trial, and he told me that he characterized this as a boxing match. He said today's decision was a split decision, but he says with the state already expressing interest that they will retry Officer Slager, he is convinced that it will be a second-round knockout in the form of a conviction of Michael Slager. Brendan?
All right, News 2's Travis Rice as we continue our team. Michael Slager decision, a mistrial in this case. We've been covering it since the news came down about 3:40 this afternoon. The former North Charleston police officer who shot Walter Scott back in April of 2015, a mistrial declared today. We have been getting reaction coming in. We do have reaction from City of Charleston Mayor John Tecklenburg. I can read you this one. Mr. Tecklenburg sends out this message. It says, quote, "Like so many others in our community, I'm deeply disappointed by the jury's inability to reach a unanimous verdict in the trial of former North Charleston police officer Michael Slager. However, despite that disappointment, I also understand that justice is not always delivered by a single jury in a single courtroom on a single day. Justice is often a journey, and the journey to justice in the Michael Slager case is far from over. He goes on to say, soon Mr. Slager will face new trials at the federal and state levels. New juries will be given an opportunity to render a verdict on his actions. Until then, we will continue to pray for our community, for justice for the family and friends of Walter Scott, and for all those whose lives have been touched by this terrible tragedy. That's from Charleston Mayor John Tecklenburg. You may know this shooting took place in North Charleston, and we also have a very short statement coming from North Charleston City Hall. This is from regarding the city of Charleston from Mayor Summey on his behalf. It says, in April of 2015, Michael Slager was arrested and charged with murder. Since that time, the case has remained outside of the city's jurisdiction and within the judicial process. Until a final decision is rendered, the city of North Charleston and Mayor Keith Summey of North Charleston will continue to refrain from commenting or discussing this case. So there we hear from both sides, the city of Charleston, the city of North Charleston, as well as we continue to cover this story. I want to go back to the phone. I believe we still have former State Attorney General Charlie Condon on the phone. Is that true? Charlie, still there?
Yes, Brendan.
I really appreciate it. You know, I am getting some tweets and texts from people I know who may not understand trial law like other people do it, but some people are asking me, how the heck can he be retried? How does that work? Can you just explain that a little bit, why Michael Slager can be retried in this case?
Oh, sure. That's a good question. When there's a mistrial, that is, there's not a unanimous jury, a verdict, I mean, the court declares a mistrial, and jeopardy, that's the protection we all have. You can't be tried twice for the same offense. Jeopardy does not attach. And so the state literally is free to retry defendant Slager as many times as it wants to if there are hung juries. Now, typically after the second or third time, if juries are still hung, the state will not go forward. But certainly in a case of this magnitude, to have one hung jury, I'm certain the state will re-prosecute.
Michael Slager a free man right now? Free to walk around, do whatever he wants?
Well, he's under bond. He's under the same bond restrictions he had before. I don't know the exact details. I think he had some sort of a house arrest, maybe with a monitor. I don't know. But the legal status that he's in is the one that he had before the trial started. That is, the case has been declared a mistrial. Nothing really happened from a legal standpoint, other than this really important exception. That is, we've all seen it. There are 4 or 5 weeks of sworn testimony. Both sides know exactly what the other positions would be of the other side. It's under oath, and so both sides can really fine-tune their presentation. I do think the interviews, if these jurors will allow it, and I'm sure some will, what they have to say about the presentation and their views of this case will definitely cause both sides to revisit their presentations. My expectation is that the state will learn the most from what they have to say, because the state has to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And my expectation is that Solicitor Wilson will refine her presentation. And you may see her go forward, as I've mentioned before, only on voluntary manslaughter, if indeed that was the only verdict that could have brought 12 together. We'll just have to wait and see. I'm sure she'll consult with the Scott family, as she should, but the exit interviews of the jurors will be really important.
You know, Charlie, we've been talking in the 6 weeks that you have sat down beside us and analyzed this trial. That video, we kept going back to it. I'm not saying it's a can't lose case, because that certainly wasn't the trial right now, at least for a Solicitor Scarlett Wilson. But that video, we thought that video would make the difference, but apparently it didn't. Is that because Andy Savage put on a heck of a show down there, or what?
Well, Andy, the defense did a really good job, but we won't really know that until the jurors are interviewed. My feelings on this, again, without talking to them and knowing the insides of both sides, would be that there was a strong majority for a conviction. In other words, they would think that the killing would be unlawful, whether it's manslaughter or murder might be a dispute. Maybe they were all going towards voluntary manslaughter.
Did she overcharge? Did she overcharge, Charlie, in this?
No, I think it was entirely proper to start off with the murder case, with the murder charge. I really do think that, because there'd be members of our community that would immediately be concerned about that not being considered by the jury. And of course, we don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they were hung up on murder versus manslaughter. Maybe there were a number for not guilty. We just don't know. But again, I think given the video and given the fact of the possibility of a federal prosecution and another state prosecution, and we don't know whether it's 11 to 1 or some other number, I do think that a mistrial, particularly in a police shooting case, that's been the norm. We've talked about this throughout the country. That's been sort of routine now. But what's clear here, she's going to re-prosecute, so I do think those that might be concerned about the mistrial should just wait. There'll be another opportunity for this case, and we'll have to wait and see what the next jury does.
One more question for you, Charlie. The sooner the better, you think? The solicitor wants to get this case tried?
If I were the solicitor, I'd be championing at the bit to move this case along, whether it's in state court or federal court. It needs to be the case is what is it, a year and a half? It needs to be re-prosecuted as soon as possible.
All right, Charlie, if you can, stay in the line. If you can, I understand, but I got you.
No,
on
I'll be happy
speed
to.
dial.
I'll be here for bit. Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, great. Thank you. Charlie Condit, former State Attorney General, helping us understand a little bit more of the process as we go on from here, a mistrial in the Michael Slager case. We want to now go back downtown, outside the courthouse where it all took place. News 2's Carol Murray, News 2's Rebecca Collette joining us now live as we continue our team coverage. Hey, ladies.
Good evening, Brendan, and we got a lot of great insight from the former South Carolina Attorney General Charlie Condon, and of course we are still getting more information as the fallout continues, mistrial in the case of Michael Slager. Rebecca, we know that some people have been responding, the governor as well as other local officials, to the decision, rather mistrial, not a decision at all, from the jury.
One of the statements that came down, of course, everyone wanting to hear from the solicitor, Scarlett Wilson, but she said in her statement that she can't actually talk about it because she plans to move forward and retry this case. She's bound by certain laws as the prosecutor that won't allow her to talk, unlike a defense team who can address the media. She did say that she can't overstate her disappointment. She said that in her closing remarks to the jury today after the mistrial was declared. She's very disappointed and even tearing up, her voice cracking during her statements to the jury, but she said that she plans to coordinate with the federal government on their case, and she also praised the Scott family, something she did in her final remarks to the jury, praising them for keeping peace and being a people of great, great faith.
And I think you remember, Becky, when the Scott family came out and spoke, they also praised her, though this was not the decision they hoped. They, in fact, praised her delivery of the facts, her presentation of evidence, that they, in fact, said that she did the best that she could. And even the sheriff, Al Cannon, in fact, praised Ninth Circuit Solicitor Scarlett Wilson. So though there is disappointment, everyone thought that she certainly gave a valiant effort in terms of presenting the information to the jury, the information and facts as she understood them to be. But we also heard from the governor. She also responded to this decision, mistrial in the murder trial of Michael Slager.
Right. She says justice is not always immediate, is the quote from her statement, but we must all have faith that it will be served. Certainly I do, she wrote in her statement, among other things. You can get the sense from a lot of these leaders that this was not the end that they were hoping for and that they are hoping for a conviction. Although the city of North Charleston mayor, you know that the city settled with the Scott family, but in his statement basically said no comment.
No surprise there. North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey has not been down here either. But actually, none of the mayors, as we know them, have been down here. But we did hear from Charleston County Sheriff Al Cannon, as well as Charleston Police Chief Greg Mullen. Of course, both of those law enforcement officials were here as a point of making sure that there is respect, dignity, and lawfulness here in the city of Charleston as we wait to see if, in fact, there will be protesters. We see that someone is, in fact, standing behind us right now, Becky, actually sitting with the Black Lives Matter sign. But we haven't seen any other protesters or people who've identified themselves as protesters out here. Not sure if that's going to happen. Not sure if the weather's going to play a part. But the Scott family were very clear, very passionate in their show of faith and also their encouragement that people remain lawful, because they believe that this process will, in fact, eventually result in justice for their son, Walter Scott.
And they didn't say no protesting. He was very clear, the brother of Walter Scott, very clear, not that he didn't think protesting was important in this case, but peaceful protesting is what they want. They said, you know, people have the right to make their voices heard. They are okay with that. They're open to people protesting, but again, in a very peaceful way.
That is the same thing that Charleston Police Chief Greg Mullen said just a short time ago. He was very clear as well. He said he would not persuade or dissuade anyone from protesting, but wanted to make sure that people understood that the Scott family encouraged people to be peaceful in their demonstrations because, again, this is in fact a process that will continue to play out in the days, weeks, and months to come. Of course, let's just talk about that. We know that now the solicitor has said that she wants to quickly move forward with another trial. She told the Scott family that, and Chris Stewart, the lead attorney in the case, said that as well.
And she made it very clear in her final statements to the jury today. She wants to hear from those jurors. She wants to understand where she needs to improve and what weaknesses they saw and where they had a hang-up with coming to a conviction in this case. So she wants to hear from them. She says they have invaluable insight in moving forward with this. And so it's likely that she'll hear from them in the next few days. Last week when this came up on Friday, she said, if we have a mistrial, I want to hear from you next week. So we're expecting maybe she could even hear from them as early as this week. No telling how long it will take to get a trial like this back on the docket. And she also mentioned that she wants to coordinate with the federal prosecutors on their case against Michael Slager.
All right. And of course, we know even with another trial at this level, that there's also still another federal trial that still has to happen. So this process is not will not soon be over for the Scott family nor the Slager family.
And certainly you could feel that there was some relief on the part of the Slager family afterward. His wife, his mother, and other family members just sort of staying on the bench, just sitting in place. And you could tell that there was a real relief about what happened. But you could also tell that not all the anxiety had washed away because they know that they have to gear up for this all over again.
Yeah, this is a very temporary moment in their lives that they might be breathing a sigh of relief, at least for this particular evening, but they know that they still have a lot of days ahead of them in terms of determining whether, in fact, he will go to jail for shooting and killing Walter Scott April 4th of 2015. Meanwhile, we are in downtown Charleston reporting from what is now the mistrial, as we understand it, in the case of Michael Slager. We, of course, will continue to broadcast live and give you the very latest information as this is a developing story. Stay with us. We are coming right back with more news after a break.
All right, thank you very much. Team coverage in downtown Charleston, turning out to be a rainy night in downtown. Carolyn Murray, Rebecca Collette with our team coverage, giving us in-depth analysis down there. We've also talked to so many people involved in this case, engaged their reaction. We have one more. It comes at the highest level. A statement from our governor, Nikki Haley, who sent it out just minutes ago. And she says, quote, "It is my understanding that there will be, as quickly as possible, a new trial where the Scott family and all of South Carolina will hopefully receive the closure that a verdict brings. Justice is not always immediate, but we must have faith. We must all have faith that it will be served. I certainly do. I urge South Carolinians in Charleston and across our state to continue along the path we have walked these last 2 years, a path of grace, faith, love, and understanding. This is who we are and who I know we will continue to be." That is a quote about the Walter Scott mistrial declaration from our governor, Nikki R. Haley. We will continue our coverage when we come back after the break.
Bravo's ready.
So
Time out. Rob's here.
I'm here
Rob's
now.
here.
Yeah, might as well might as well switch out so Chrissy can go home. But it's just a minute, right? Okay.